Okay,
Elizabeth.
so we are live on YouTube right now. You are welcome to start whenever you like.
Janita, can you give me a smile there? Can you hear me, Janita? Can you give me a smile?
Sorry, I was muted. Yep.
Yeah, just a nice smile.
Oh,
And then I'll get Elizabeth. So we are at 12:02. Let's wait another minute or so.
I'm just gonna put my phone on the,
So Elizabeth, while we wait the next minute, just give me a smile. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we are at 12:03. I think we should start. And if anyone comes in, we'll let them in during the introductions.
Okay. So welcome everybody to Tax Time. It's that time of year again. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Janine, can you bring forward the slides? So just a couple of housekeeping items. Everybody's going to be on mute except for the speakers. And we want you to use the chat feature, the chat box, to ask a question, or if you're having any technical problems. And you should be able to find the chat box on the bottom of your screen. And also just know that there's a lot of information in this presentation, but we're going to email it to you. So, don't worry too much about remembering every single number, but just the concepts are important. And, you can certainly, there'll be plenty of time to ask questions. Okay, next slide, please. I'm hearing an echo. Does anybody else hear that? Okay, it stopped.
I do hear a little bit of an echo.
It just stopped. Okay. My name is Elizabeth Brown. I will be your instructor today, and Janine Marlowe will be my co-host. And just a little bit about me. I've been a volunteer instructor with My Money Workshop for a little over 2 years now. I'm a CPA and a life coach. My background is in taxes and accounting systems. And as a life coach, I help people shift their limiting beliefs as a doorway to financial empowerment. And I'll let Janine tell you a little bit about herself.
Sure. Thank you, Elizabeth. Hi, I'm Janine Marlowe. I have an accounting and financial analysis background. I've worked in public accounting doing audit and also for a couple large banks, and it's a pleasure to be here today.
Great. We'll go to the next slide. So My Money Workshop is a nonprofit organization. All of the instructors are volunteer. And what we do is we educate people to manage their finances wisely so that they can make a lifetime of informed decisions. And just to note that the information we're covering today is for informational purposes only for this live webinar, and it's not intended to be and should not be considered advice with respect to your personal finances. So My Money Workshop has a whole series of financial wellness programs. These are them. And today, obviously, March 23rd is tax time, but we'd love to see you at any of the other ones that are coming up. And, please share with your friends and colleagues as well. So our objective today is to provide you with the knowledge and tools to reduce your tax time stress. And I just want to start with a question. How many people know when your tax returns are due? Celeste, you want to unmute yourself, Celeste, and share that?
Well, it's usually April 16th, but I think they moved it because of COVID.
They did, very good. Yeah, so April 15th is usually the day. If it falls on a Sunday or a Saturday, it gets moved to the next Monday. But they did move it to May 17th because of COVID. So you have an extra, a little bit over a month to get your taxes in order. Thank you, Celeste. So yep, we got another month. So we're going to start with some of the tax updates for families with children under the age of 18. So there's a new 2021 child tax credit. Let me just rewind for a minute. So before I get into that, we're going over a lot of information. There's a lot of credits, there's stimulus payments, there's all these payments, and you may be getting all these deposits into your bank account, which is great, but you may not know that they're accurate and you may be entitled to more. So the reason I want to go over a lot of this is just so that you have something more concrete to make sure that you're getting what you're entitled to. So there's a new 2021 child tax credit. I've got an echo again. And that will be available to parents with children under the age of 18. And this is the first time that children age 17 are entitled to the credit. It's new that they raise the age. And families with children under 6 are entitled to $3,600 per child. And children age 6 to 17, they're entitled to $3,000 per child. Now, this is a 2021 tax credit. So let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. So this, the way this credit works is the default is going to be, and the IRS is literally working on this as we speak. The default right now is going to be that you're going to get, starting in July, 50% of the credit that they calculate that you're entitled to based on your most recent tax filing, okay? You can opt out of that if you would prefer. Some people like to get a big refund when they do their taxes. And if you're one of those people, you can opt out of that. There's going to be a portal on the IRS website. It's not there yet. And you can say you want to wait and deal with it when you file your 2021 tax return, which will be in April of 2022, okay? But the way it works is if you're entitled to $3,000 credit, they're going to give you half of that this year, and they're going to do it between July and December, and you would get a payment of $250 a month between July and December. And then there'll be a reconciling component to your 2021 tax return where you will reconcile what you got, what you were entitled to, and all that. So just keep that in mind. You may, be surprised to get these deposits or these checks mailed to you. The portal that's not up yet, the other thing that you can do is, so for example, let's say you just had a baby in January of this year. Well, the IRS only knows what's on your 2019, or as you're filing now, by July, when they start the payments, most people will have filed their 2020 return, and they don't know that there's another child. So when that portal's up and running, you can go in there before July. This is all, ideally, if it all works out, and let them know you have a new child. There's another child, and this way you'll get that payment for the second child as well, or the extra child. So let's go back to the previous screen. So again, this is a new credit, but let's talk about who's entitled to it. So it's income driven. So you can get the full credit if you're a single parent and you earned up to $75,000 a year. If you're a married couple and you earned up to $150,000 a year, then you can get the credit. If you earned more than the 75 or the 150, the credit gets reduced. There's a formula for every $50. It gets reduced by $50 for every $1,000 over those two limits of 75 and 150. So in the case of a single parent, once you earn $95,000, that credit has been fully phased out. Okay, it'll be reduced between over 75 and 95, but by the time you hit $95,000, it's gone. And the same thing with a married couple. That will be phased out by the time you reach $170,000 of a joint income, okay? So that's the new 2021 child tax credit. There's still the existing child tax credit that's been around, and if you don't qualify for the new one, the existing one has a higher income threshold. So you would be able to claim $2,000 per child for individuals making up to $200,000, or for a married couple making up to $400,000. Okay. And you don't have to be employed to receive the new credit. This is also new. This is part of the new legislation that just came out. So if you didn't make any money, you can still file a return just to get the credit. It'll be issued to you as a refund. So that's a lot of information right there. So before we go on to the next update, I just want to see if anybody has any immediate questions. Okay. I don't see any hands raised. So, okay. So we can go to the slide 10. There was also a change to unemployment. In 2020 only, right now, as we speak, everything's changing. You can, if you've made less, if your income is under 75,000, if you're single, you can exclude the first 10,200 of your unemployment from your taxable income in 2020. Normally, unemployment is fully taxable. And again, if you're a married couple, you each got unemployment, you can exclude the first 20,400, so it's 10,200 per person. As of today, New York State is still planning to tax your 2020 unemployment benefits. However, New York has slowly, with other things, with all the legislation that's gone on, has followed in the footsteps of the federal government. But as of today, they haven't changed that. They want their money. So 2020 unemployment benefits are fully taxable on the state level, and on the federal level, you've got these exclusions. In addition, anybody who's qualifying for unemployment within their state, the federal government is going to give them an extra $300 per week for benefits that are received between March 14th and September 6th. And that's, again, just for 2020. And we don't know, for 2021, this piece. And as of now, all of 2021 unemployment will be taxable on the federal and state level, unless that changes. So again, are there any questions on this unemployment before we move on? Okay, the next slide, please. So now we have the economic impact payments that many of you have received. So again, a lot of information, a lot of moving parts. So in 2020, there were 2 economic impact payments, okay? If your adjusted gross income was less than 75,000 if you're single, file single, or 150 if you're married, you were entitled to receive a full $1,200 individual or $2,400 if married. And that came out in the spring of 2020, okay? Now, you weren't entitled to this payment if you have a non-resident alien status, if you don't have a valid social security number, if you can be claimed as a dependent on someone else's return, they're getting the money, so you wouldn't get it. And if you didn't meet the income thresholds, but they base that on, so just think about it, in the spring of 2020, what did they know? Well, they knew what you filed for 2018, and you may or may not have filed 2019 by then. So they're looking at the most recent, they were looking at the most recent tax return. The income threshold for those payments was 75,000 again, and it gets gradually reduced if you hit 99,000 for a single filer or 198,000 for a married couple. Okay, so the first economic impact payment was the $1,200. Then there was also a qualifying child credit that you got, a payment that you would get of $500 again for that. So if you had filed your return, some people might have gotten $1,700 if they had one child and they were individual, they would have gotten $1,700. So there's a $500 component for the child, and there's a $1,200 component for the tax filer. The second stimulus payment of 2020 was passed, that was approved late in 2020, and it was sent out in January and February of this year. So most people should have gotten that already. And if you have a qualifying child on your 2019 tax return, because by now, most people would have filed their 2019 tax return, in addition to the $600 for you as a tax filer, or $1,200 for you and your husband, you were entitled to another $600 per qualifying child. Now, if you were entitled to these, if you see that you've made the, you're under the income threshold and you were entitled to them and you did not get them yet, and that has happened with some people for some reason, on your 2020 tax filing, there's a whole reconciliation. It's called the economic recovery rebate reconciliation. So you can put in, did you get the $1,200? Did you get the $600? Or in the case of being married, the $2,400, and you put it in. This is if you're doing the return electronically, and then it calculates, because it knows your income, where you met in the threshold. And if you didn't get it and you were entitled to it, you will now get it as a refund or an offset to what you owe on your tax return. So let's say you were entitled to the $1,700 plus that, and you didn't get it. It would reduce, if you had a $3,000 tax bill, it would reduce your tax bill first. If anything was left over, you would get that as a refund. So that's on the 2020 economic impact statement payments. So does anybody have any questions on those? And just so you know, those are being reported on a form, and we're going to see that form. We're going to reference that form in a minute. So like we get a W-2 for our wages or a 1099 for the interest in our bank account, they have generated an EIP form indicating what they gave you. But I'm hearing from people that it doesn't always agree with what they got. So that's why the rebate reconciliation credit on the tax return is important. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So now there's a new economic impact payment just passed by the Biden administration with the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And that is, again, these payments are coming out automatically. They're probably going to be looking now at your 2000. If you haven't filed your 2020 tax return yet, and your 2019 income qualified you for this economic impact payment number 3, but your 2020 income is going to be greater, put your 2020 tax return on extension, because they will base it on your 2019, and you'll get it. And they're not going to ask for it back once you file 2020. They're not going to the trouble to do that. So if your income was lower in 2020 than it is in 2021, I mean 2019 versus 2020, I would recommend that you put the 2020, or talk to your tax preparer about it, but it would make sense probably to put your 2020 return on extension so that they're basing it on the last filed return, which would be the 2019 tax return. Okay. So $1,400 per person for the parent. If you're married filing joint, it'll be $2,800 plus, for every dependent you have, an additional $1,400 for each of them. So this is a substantial amount of money, and they're not spreading this one out. This is being issued as we speak. So the eligibility for number 3, this income payment, is similar to the other 2 payments. It's a little bit different. So it's $75,000. Under $75,000, you are entitled to the full $1,400. But for every dollar over that, it gets reduced up to $80,000. So if you make anything over $80,000, you don't get any of it. And the married filing joint is $150,000, and it gets completely phased out by $160,000. So any questions on that? Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay, good. So that's the hard part of this. I mean, it's a lot of information, but I think it's important to know what you're entitled to as these payments are just being sent to you. You know, don't just be happy that you got them. Make sure you got what you were totally fully entitled to.
Elizabeth, there is a question in the chat.
Okay, let me look at it. So this is from Rosie. Regarding stimulus payment not received, but would be received after the tax filing, would that be taxable for next year? So we talked about 3 payments. So Rosie, can you give me more information about which payment you're talking about, the 2020 payments or this new payment of 2021? We'll give Rosie a minute to type that into the chat. So you got the 600, but you didn't get the 1200, it sounds like? And you're waiting to see if it would have come. If you didn't get the 1200, that's odd because the 1200 was issued in the spring of last year. Okay, so the 600 was after that. Oh, you didn't get the 600. Okay. All right. So what you might want to do is you have till May. I would wait till May 17th to file your return because you may get it between now and then. And I would say that if by May 17th you still didn't get it, then let the tax preparer know, and then you will get the $600 as a credit on your tax return. And you'll either get refunded that or it'll offset any tax you owe. So just let me know, Rosie, if that's clear. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? That was a good question. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, so what else do we need to know to get started with our taxes? Next slide. So let's just talk a little bit about why do we pay tax? Nobody likes to pay tax, but it's helpful to know what your tax money goes to. And it's really there to help us. It benefits us. This money gets allocated to our first responders, firefighters, police officers, our public transportation, our highway system, our schools, our libraries. Okay, all of those entities get federal dollars. And I don't know about where you live. I live in Ossining. We have a phenomenal library, and I'm grateful every day. I've lived in Ossining for over 30 years and used it a lot when my son was little, and I still use it as an adult. We have great programming there, and that's part of my federal dollars. So I want to use that. I appreciate that. So the IRS stands for. Can you go back, Janine? Sorry. The IRS stands for the Internal Revenue Service. And it's a government agency that's responsible for the collection of and the enforcement of our tax laws. And just a little fun fact, it was established in 1862 by President Lincoln. And the IRS it operates under the United States Department of Treasury. So that's the department that runs that. Next slide, please. Okay, so when it comes to our individual taxes, we have, at least in this state, we have 3 taxes. We have the federal taxes that everyone pays, and New York does have a state tax and a city tax. Not all states have taxes. My sister lives in Texas, they don't have a tax. I have cousins in Florida, they don't have a state tax. And in New York, if you live in New York City or Yonkers, so Yonkers is considered a city tax, you're going to have to pay tax to those 2 cities. The federal taxes are paid to the Internal Revenue Service, and New York's taxes go to the Department of Taxation and Finance. Next slide, please. So the federal government and New York State and all states have different filing criteria, okay? So if you, on a federal level, did not make, well, I'll read it the way it's written. If you've made $1,220 per year, at least if you've made up to that amount, you have to file a federal return. But for New York, you have to file a federal return if you made only $4,000. So there could be a case where you are filing on the state level, but not on the federal level. Now, again, this year, so this is like the general, but this year particularly because of all the COVID stimulus payments and these credits for the kids, you might file a return even if you didn't make money just to get those credits, okay? But these are the minimums where you must file a return. So why would a teen file taxes if they just had a summer job and they made under $4,000, why would they bother to file a tax on a federal or state level? And the reason is they may have had state and federal income taxes taken out of their check, and they can get that back by filing their return. So sometimes when you get a part-time job, if you don't think it's going to be, if it's not paying a lot and it's just going to be a one-shot thing for kids in school, high school, you can fill out a form that says you don't want to have any taxes taken out because you're a student, and then you don't have to go to the trouble to file a return to get the refund. So that's an option on the withholding forms. Next slide, please. So federal income tax, Medicare, and Social Security taxes, they make up all your federal income taxes, okay? Next slide, please. So these taxes that we've talked about, they come out of your paycheck automatically. You fill out a form for the federal and the state when you get hired, and based on how you fill that out, they're going to take that out of your taxes. And your pay stub will show, here's what you made. We're going to look at that in a minute. Here's your gross. Here's what came out, and here's what you took home. Next slide, please. So here's a particular stub. And notice on the bottom left is your gross pay. That's what you made before you had any taxes withheld. And then you could see in the center where the withholding deductions are. Yep. FICA, federal, Medicare, and Social Security tax, that is always a tax that you're going to pay, and you will never be refunded for that. You know how when you do your tax return, you get a refund? That's your federal income tax or your state income tax. But this Medicare and Social Security, that's a tax that goes to the government. When we retire, that's helping fund our retirement a bit. So that's never going to be refunded. And that's the minimum tax that you will always see come out. And then you have your net tax check, which is up there on the top right. And when we teach budgeting and money management, we always tell you to budget based on your net check, what you take home, not on your gross wages. Any questions on this from anybody? Okay, next slide, please. So again, we don't, I'm not going to go all through all of this. You have this, but there's different income tax brackets on the federal and state level, and how much you make determines how much you pay. So the more you make, the more you pay. But on the bottom right, those two rates don't change. That they've been around for as long as I've been doing taxes. That's the Medicare rate has been 1.45. The Social Security rate is 6.2. That doesn't change whether you make $10 or $10,000 or $100,000. That's what you pay up until a certain cutoff, which is now like at $140 something thousand. That changes. The cutoff changes for Social Security. Medicare goes on indefinitely. Next slide, please. So again, just to understand that your tax dollars do go to programs and institutions that we benefit from, okay? And you are also required to report any cash payments you make. So just so you know that, and when someone works as like waiters and waitresses and bartenders, their cash tips are supposed to be reported. They're required to report those. So, and just now with the internet, the IRS website, New York State websites, all these websites let you know what the filing thresholds are if they change from year to year. So just take a look at them and make sure that you know whether or not you are required to file a tax return. But like I said, this year is an unusual year that you may want to file, even if you're under the threshold, if you are entitled to any of the credits or the stimulus payments that we discussed. Now, the IRS has these sites called the Vita sites, and they are approved sites that offer free or low-cost tax preparation to people who make less than $50,000 a year. Next slide, please. So what do you need to file your tax return? You need your W-2. That's the number one thing, okay? The EIP-1 and EIP2 forms are what I talked about. Remember the $1,200 and the $600 that you were entitled to? The EPI1 is the $1,200, the EIP2 is the $600. So Rosie, if you should be getting these 2 forms, and if it shows the EIP1 says $1,200 that you got and you didn't get it, if you're not doing your tax return yourself, let your tax preparer know that even though you got that form that says you got the $1,200, you did not get it, and then you'll get the credit. They'll take the credit on the tax return currently for 2020. You need your tax ID number, but that's on your W-2. And again, you know, April 15th is the normal due date, but it has now been pushed to May 17th, which, by the way, is my birthday. And I don't like that it got pushed to my birthday, even though I always take my birthday off. So I'm going to have all the tax returns done by May 16th. I've let all my clients know. Any questions on any of this so far? Okay, next slide, please. So how do you get your forms? Well, if you have access to a computer, they're all on the internet. The IRS website is referenced here in New York State as well. But also a lot of the post office and libraries carry the tax forms, the most commonly used tax forms. So you got plenty of options of where to get the forms. Next slide, please. Now, there's a lot of apps now out there, as we all know, but there's some pretty good ones that you can do. Again, if your tax return is not that complicated, through a question and answer prompting, they will ask you stuff, and you'll, using the documents that we talked about, you'll enter that information. But these are just some of them, some of the apps and some of the tax software that you can use to file your tax returns. Again, you'll be getting this handout, so I just wanted to point that out to you, but you can look at those details later. Next slide, please. So let's just talk a little bit more about the Vita sites, okay? The Vita program has been around for over 50 years. It's available to people who generally make less than $50,000, 57 or less, persons with disabilities, and people who have limited English speaking. So so look around for for the Vita sites, and at the bottom of this page, you'll see how to find the one nearest to you. You can either call or look up there's a Vita locator tool on the IRS website. In addition, there's the TCE program that's for the elderly, and that offers free basic tax return preparation. And I know for a fact that the Austin Library has offered that for years. I don't know if it's a Vita site. I don't think it is, but it definitely is a TCE site. So again, the TCE is free. Vita is free, or there's a sliding scale of what you would pay. So next slide, please. So a couple things to keep in mind when looking for a TCE site. The majority of them are operated by the AARP Foundation because they are for the elderly. And to locate your nearest TCE site, you can look at the AARP site locator tool on the IRS website or call the 888 number. At these sites, you have the option to prepare your own basic federal return and state returns using their free web-based tax software with a volunteer, IRS certified volunteer that will help you through the process. So that option to do it through the software is, it has to be identified as a self-prep site in the listing. So basically, we just wanted to bring to your attention, there's a lot of resources to have your tax return done for free or at a very reduced cost. And, you know, let your friends and family know, your anyone you know that's elderly that, you know, doesn't have a super complicated tax return. This is again, this is funded by, part of the way this is funded is through tax dollars. So it's a way of getting back a benefit for taxes that you have paid. Next slide, please. Again, just look around in your community, read the bulletin boards, local paper. A lot of times this stuff is all listed. But if any of that, if you have access to technology and you're good with technology, both New York State and the federal government have a link on their websites where you can electronically file your tax return for free if your income is $72,000 or less. So again, that requires some, technological savvy as opposed to going to one of the sites where you have someone there to help you. You can do it for free on the New York State and federal government website. Next slide, please. So just the key messages for today is we have an extension to May 17th for this year. Make sure you keep all your tax documents in a secure place. Check out and make sure you know what kind of free resources are available to you. You know now that we've got all these stimulus payments and credits. So just make sure that you are getting the maximum benefit that you're entitled to. Next slide, please. So now again, any questions on anything? And I love questions. We all learn from each other's questions, so there's no bad question. So Celeste has a question. So Celeste, why don't you unmute yourself?
Just a quick question. Do you know if these Vita sites or even the AARP sites have language communication people there to help with translation?
I would imagine that they do, but when you find your sites that's closest to you, call them and make sure.
Okay.
I would call and make sure, but I would think that that is one of the things, maybe not all the sites, because I guess it depends on the community resources, but I would call them and check.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question, just sort of a general one that I usually get about, turn my camera on, about people who may have some, may not have filed their taxes in previous years and now want to start filing taxes, or for whatever reason are new, if they're new immigrants or something like that, and they're new to filing taxes. Is there something specifically that people should keep in mind with regards to sort of being first time tax filers?
So are you, I just want to get clear, are you saying that they never filed in the past because they didn't need to, and now they're starting to file?
Yeah, that, exactly, that, or let's say there were children and their parents were filing, filing with them as dependents, but also as an immigrant, like I have a lot of immigrant family that comes in and sort of first time, they get a job and then they file taxes. They usually go to tax preparers because they're, like Celeste questioned, they don't know the language, they don't know the terminology. Is there something that you would suggest to both of those groups that they need to keep in mind?
Just in general?
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure that they know how to gather their tax documents, that they know that if they had a job through an employer, they're going to get a W-2. If this could be a case for them, if they got paid as an independent contractor, they might not even know that. They might not even know they're getting paid as an independent contractor. But they're going to get a 1099 showing how much money they were paid. If they have any interest in their bank account, they're going to get a tax. So there are tax forms that come from different revenue streams. So they just really need to make sure they have that all together before they file. Obviously, they have to have a Social Security number. And I would just encourage them to make sure they are get their return prepared at a place that speaks their language so that they can ask any questions they want, so they're fully comfortable with everything and they can learn. I mean, that would be that's what comes to my mind at this time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, next slide. So we would love for you to stay connected to us on social media. We also have some pre-recorded videos on our website that's referenced up there. And we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter and Instagram. So, we would love for you to follow us on social media and share the content with your friends, family, and colleagues. And that's it. Thank you. And hopefully you're all getting a refund coming this year with all these credits and payments. So thank you for joining us. And again, just want to remind you that we have a whole series of financial programs laid out for the year. And if you enjoyed this, or if there's a topic that is coming up that you could benefit from, or someone who could benefit from, please share the content with everybody.
Thank you so much. This was really helpful.
Great. Thank you for coming, Celeste. And thank you, Rosie, for coming and for your questions.